Good afternoon, everyone. It's 5 o'clock on October 1st. I'm going to call the St. Croix County Board of Supervisors to order. And the first order, we're going to have an invocation by Father John Garrett of St. Patrick's Parish. So everybody stand, please.
Thank you for having me today. As you have pastors on a regular basis, we certainly appreciate that. And I was reflecting earlier today that as people in leadership positions, the difficulty that you often face, and certainly we live in a time when oftentimes there can be a great deal of criticism directed toward our leaders. And so the invocation today are some words that are attributed to a couple of different people, oftentimes most attributed, though, to a woman by the name of Mother Teresa of Calcutta. I'd like to just share these words with you to certainly provide encouragement as you continue to lead within our community. We pray. People are unreasonable, illogical, and self-centered, but love them anyway. If you do good, people will accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives, but do good anyway. If you are successful, you will win false friends and true enemies, but succeed anyway. The good you do today may be forgotten by tomorrow, but do good anyway. Honesty and frankness can make you vulnerable, but be honest and frank anyway. The biggest person with the biggest idea can be shot down by the smallest person with the smallest mind, but think big anyway. People often favor underdogs, but will only follow the top dogs. Fight for some underdogs anyway. What you spend years building may be destroyed overnight, but build anyway. People need help, but may attack you if you help them. Help people anyway. Give the world the best you have, and sometimes you'll get kicked in the teeth, but give the world the very best anyway. And Heavenly Father, we pray for our leaders, especially those who do gather here this evening, that we may appreciate the work that they do. Guide them, direct them, inspire them, help them, assure them of your presence, Lord, and of our appreciation for them. Lord, we ask your blessings upon our county, upon all those who serve in our county government. We ask you, Lord, to bless them, keep them safe, keep them healthy in your love and care, protect them. Lord, we just ask your blessings upon this meeting tonight and upon all those who gather here, whether in leadership or to present. Help them to do so with integrity and honesty and forthrightness as we make our prayer now through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Father. Will you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance now?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do roll call now. Okay, so we're missing two. So, thank you. We'll move forward with our public comment at this time, and it will be limited to 3 minutes for anybody that's going to speak this evening. So the first one I have is the Carrie Weaver. Thank you.
Thanks. Good afternoon. My name is Carrie Weaver, and I live at 229 Starwood. I am on the Starwood Homeowners Association Board of Directors. Other members of our Homeowners Association are here as well, and I ask you to please stand so you can note your presence. We are here today regarding the county's purchase of 2 acres from Gary Zappa and how that purchase relates to the Eckert Blufflands Park and impacts our private property. In the last several weeks, we have attended 2 Board of Adjustment meetings and 1 Community Development Committee meeting. After we presented to the Community Development Committee, Supervisor Hansen indicated that he was not inclined to put our issues on the next agenda for that committee. So today I am asking you as the entire group of county supervisors to tell us who will address our issue and when that will happen, please. Starwood Homeowners Association owns 28 acres of property that is under conservancy deed with Western Wisconsin Land Trust. We are here because significant misstatements of fact have been made regarding our property. These misstatements have created ambiguity around the transaction of the purchase from Mr. Zappa and our property rights specifically. Worse, at the June Board of Supervisors meeting, concerns about money laundering were expressed by multiple supervisors, and County Corporation Counsel indicated this may not be appropriate use of mitigation funds. To give just 3 examples of factual misstatements at the June 4th meeting. Number 1, Ms. Denzer indicated the conservancy land is co-owned by the Starwood Homeowners Association and Western Wisconsin Land Trust. This is incorrect. The conservancy deed does not change the fact that the conservancy land is private property owned solely by our homeowners association. Number 2, she stated that both parties were aware of the Zappa land purchase and ramifications. This is incorrect. We learned of the land purchase on July 22nd, long after the purchase agreement was signed. And number 3, she stated explicitly in responding to a question by Supervisor Schoberg that park visitors would have access to the St. Croix River through our conservancy land. This is incorrect. Public access on our private property is not only trespass, but it is expressly forbidden in our conservancy deed. Given these misstatements and concern about money laundering, our homeowners association wants to make it clear that we had no knowledge of this transaction prior to July 22nd, that we have no part in any money laundering, and we seek to clarify our property rights with the county. Thus, we are here today to request the county undertake 2 actions with respect to our private property. Number 1, sign a memorandum of understanding that documents and memorializes the oral agreement as stated at the August 22nd Board of Adjustment public meeting. And number 2, release the easement that runs on Starwood private property that's included in the Zappa purchase agreement. We ask these 2 items be included on the next agenda for the appropriate board or committee of supervisors and that you tell us who that body is. Our land has been repeatedly mischaracterized and we simply ask you clarify the public record. Thank you very much. I have a packet of information to leave with you. To whom should I give it? Okay. It has a draft of the memorandum of understanding in my business card as well. Thank you.
Next person is Alice Thiede.
My name is Alice Thiede, and I am the Secretary of the Starwood Homeowners Association. For the record, I will read the 7 points of agreement between the St. Croix Board of Adjustment and the Starwood Homeowners Association, which I heard expressed at the public meeting of the Board of Adjustment on August 22nd, 2019. Agreement. The parties agree as follows. The conservancy land is private property solely owned by Starwood HOA. Number 2, the county has no intent to become a member of the Starwood HOA. Number 3, the county will not enter onto or use the Starwood Conservancy land for any purpose. Number 4, the county will not grant access to the beach within the Starwood Conservancy land. Number 5, the Starwood Conservancy land was never part of the scope of the Eckert Bluffs on the St. Croix Parkland development. Number 6, the county will adopt the recommendations from Rick Remington, Conservation Director of the Landmark Conservancy, in his email to Ellen Denzer dated August 16, 2019, Exhibit C. And number 7, the Community Development Department will notify all landowners adjacent to the park, including Starwood HOA, of park planning meetings and will work with landowners who are adjacent to the park, including Starwood HOA, to address concerns they may have during the park planning process. Thank you.
Thank you. Still open for public comment. Anybody else wants to get for public comment at this time? Still open for public comment. We're still open for public comment. Not seen any more. Thank you very much. We'll move forward with our agenda. I have the consent agenda. I need a motion to approve. Supervisor Osnes, Supervisor Peterson, second. We have a motion and a second on the floor for the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Not seeing any discussion. We'll call for the vote. That's all yeses. Thank you. Presentations or recognitions? Do you have anything for
Just
that?
the audit,
Okay.
audit report.
Okay, audit report. Go ahead.
Yeah,
That's it.
that's it. Yeah, the Brock Gian from the auditing firm is here to present the 2018 year end.
All right, good evening. I've got Jonathan Sherwood with me here today. He runs the day-to-day activity for our audit each year here. And so we met with the administrative committee in early August, went over the detail, the results in great detail. I had a really good discussion about things, and so tonight I'm here just to give you a really high-level background on the results of the audits here and be available if you have any questions. So if you had any time to look at some of the stuff in advance, you had questions, just throw those out at any time. I mentioned before I start here too that you know, it was some significant changes from a finance standpoint, as you're fully aware, because of the new system that was implemented for the county here. That was first applicable to the audit now in 2018, for the 2018 audit that we performed here in 2019. So just recognize your staff there that they made it through a lot of extra work there to pull everything together for you guys to get the audit completed. So what I'm going to go through, what you probably have, I see some booklets. You probably have a thicker document. That's the annual financial statement. That includes all the detail. Again, I'm happy to talk about any of that if you want. You might also have a summary, at least in an electronic version. And that's what I'm going to cover. We'll put it on the screen here as well. It's just a couple page item that we like to summarize everything you need to hear from your auditor each year. So we'll start with that. On page 1, we talk about the results of our testing and what did we report. A couple of highlights on this page anyway is what opinion did we place on the thicker booklet itself. We've issued an unmodified opinion. That's the highest level you can receive, and that's what you strive to achieve there. There's an additional paragraph in there this year. If you get into it and you're looking and you compared it to last year, it's going to look a little different. All that does is explain a new standard that was implemented. So when you have a new standard and it affects the presentation and the numbers, we describe that in the opinion. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that was a little bit later here. We issue a report on internal control as well. You want us to come in and take a look at how the system's working, how your reconciliations are pulled together, stuff like that. We report on that. There's 3 things that are pretty common that we reported this year. The first 2, they're repeats that you receive each year, actually. If we come and propose adjustments to your books, that ends up in there. It's completely common for us to do that. The other one that's common, but something you guys actually tried to work at to resolving is your limited segregation of duties. Item number 2. Your new system is helping you in that regard, so you made some improvements. You changed the way things were done. The electronic version of the system itself allows you to incorporate some new controls. A lot of that's still a work in process. There are improvements still being made now. So we expect to take a look at that again and see that as kind of a work in process and continually improving situation. Last one on there, that one pops in and out every once in a while. We put it in there this year. It's when cash is kind of one of those sensitive issues where if it's not tied out to the numbers that we report, typically we have a finding on that, and here that is the case here. We talked about it. Your team knows about how to pull that together differently for the upcoming year, so I'd expect that one to go away going forward. Lastly, we look at some compliance as well, not just the numbers, and we didn't find any problems with that. So before I get into the numbers, any questions on any of that? That makes sense?
I don't see the material weaknesses in the electronic version. I see it in the report. Explain what that is.
Sure. There's actually another report that you send to the state and the federal government. It's called the the federal Schedule of Federal Awards and State Awards. So that is a separate bound document. You have the county has access to that in an electronic version. That was sent off to the state departments and the federal government through online reporting. At the end of that separate document is where you'll find the details of those findings. So if you're looking for a little more description of what those are, that's where you'll find those. Those aren't described and disclosed in the financial statement itself. That reports on the numbers and the activity.
So scroll down. You said that we have that document on the screen, but it's not in the packet.
Oh, you don't have it in the packet. Do you know offhand? Okay. So you're going to get a copy of that from finance. It might be posted as well at this point. All right, to summarize, we summarize some of the numbers. We pull this data out of the financial statements, and we give you a 4-year comparison here. So I won't go through this all in detail, but in the general fund, when you get to the bottom of this particular page and schedule, you're going to take a look at a little bit further down if you scroll to the change, current year change. That tells you the results for the year. So the change in total fund balance, some of you might be familiar with the terminology of net income or loss for the year. That's what that row represents. So there was a reduction of fund balance of $2,091,760. There's reasons for that. You actually had revenue that was greater than budget by about $3.5 million. But you did build into your, you did plan transfers out. So you had $3.5 million, or $4.9 million, sorry, of transfers out. $2.5 million went to the debt service fund, and $2.1 million went to your capital projects fund. So that money just went from one fund to a different place, and I'll show you that here in just a second. So what remains then in the general fund for reserves is where I point out each year. For those familiar with this presentation, we look at your fund balance section. And you've got different categories of fund balance. We focus in on the one that's available to you as your reserves, and that's the first shaded row there that I'm assigned. So you've got the rest of the money is in this category is earmarked for specific purposes. But the $17.2 million, we compare that to how much you spent during the year, the total expenditures row, the second shaded row, $37.8 million, and you get that ratio at the bottom. And that's the one we track each year. We compare you to other counties. And see how you're trending there. You can see you had a bit of a dip from last year. As I pointed out, you did have some planned transfers, though. That is a big reason for that drop. You've got a policy that says you are going to maintain a minimum of 35%, so you're above your own policy. Our general rule of thumb I talk about each year is to maintain a minimum, not necessarily a target of 33%, which is just 4 months worth of activity. And then the average for the counties we work with in Northwest Wisconsin is around 48%. So right in the ballpark of all those, and consider it in good shape. So moving to the next page, we talk about the rest of your governmental funds here. I'm not going to spend time on all these, just to point out the changes. So when the new system was incorporated, there were some changes in the way you report things. So that might be a little tough to read here, but your aging programs and your ADRC in the middle of the page there, those funds were closed at the beginning of the year. They were moved into HSS, or HHS, sorry. And so that's why you'll see a bit of an increase there, an increase of $507,000 as the results for the year. Well, about $900,000 of that was this transferring from the other funds. So you actually had an operational loss of about $366,000 in Human Services. So you want to keep that as perspective. And then,
excuse me.
yep.
it's hard for me to read that up there. Are you referencing any pages in here?
I can show you where that's at too.
Because I can't.
Yep.
At this angle,
Sure.
I can't, I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, so if we look at page in the booklet, you can go to page 19. Yep, you have your booklet, you can go to page 19 and see there's a lot of detail here, so bear with me, but it's the second column of data. That's what I'm referring to here in your Health and Human Services Fund. So you can see this is the revenues and expenses for the year, and the third to last row is that $507,000. That's the net income or loss for the year for this fund. Just above that, you can see the transfer, and I mentioned $874,000 of transfer in from other funds that helped create that positive results for the year. That's what I was trying to explain. Okay, so maybe we'll move to item number 3 in the summary, and you'll stay on this page though in the booklet. And your capital projects fund. So in the past, if you remember, you had multiple different capital projects fund. You tracked them by year and by project, essentially. Decision was made with the new system to combine everything into one capital projects fund and track everything separately through coding. So when you're referring to your booklet, you'll see that in the 4th column, capital projects fund. That is the, again, the revenues and expenses for the year for this particular fund. You can see all the activity in there. You can actually see where I was going to point out the $27 million of new debt that was issued. This is where it was recorded. You probably remember that debt issuance from 2018. Included in the $19 million of expenses, you had $15 million for a highway facility and $4.1 million. That was basically a bunch of other smaller projects. And then one other significant item is $2.6 million of transfer in. As I mentioned before, from the general fund, $2.1 million of that transfers came from the general fund. So all that activity culminated together to get to where it is at the end of 18 there. And you have in your reserves $15.2 million that goes to finance projects in 19 and going forward. The debt service fund on the summary, the next section here, same story. Finance combined all the individual debt service funds into one. That's why the trend looks a little strange there, but everything is now in one fund. That's the 3rd column in your booklet on that same page I was talking about. You can see where the levy is coming in there for $4 million. You can see your principal and interest expenditures a little further down in the schedule. And in this case, there was $2.5 million transferred in from the general fund as well. And then your ending results there, the ending reserves is $3.5 million. Which matches the summary. Next item on the next page then. Got to switch gears a little bit. So now we're going to talk about the nursing home. So this is full accrual. So you got to switch the pages in your booklet. Got to move a couple pages forward. And move to page 23. 23 gives you the revenues and expenses. Mostly on this page in the summary gives you the balance sheet, so your assets and liabilities. That'd be on page 21, but I have you focus here on page 23 just because what I want to talk about is the results for the year. So this year, there was a net change, the operational loss, if you will, of $58,000. So that is significantly better than it had been. 2018 was the first full year of operations in the new facility. So you'd expect the financial results to be different. So revenues were up about almost $1.2 million compared to the prior year in 17. Expenses were only up $406,000. So you can tell that difference, that gap is going straight to the bottom line there. And these numbers do include over $600,000 of depreciation expense as well. So this isn't just a cash flow gain or loss, this is actual results. All right, next on the list then, next page would be your highway department. Same thing, this is full accrual, a little different than your general fund as far as how you account for things. But we do focus on a similar item here, change in net position. So on the screen, it's the second to last row there. You can see it's a negative $101,000. On the booklet, you'll find that on the bottom of page 23, you're gonna have to combine two numbers because this one had an impact from that At the very onset, I talked about a change in accounting standards, right? And the way it's reported, and that's why it was some additional wording. You can see here in your booklet, you've got, you had positive results of $695,000. Okay, that's the operations for the year, but you took a charge of $797,000 a negative because you implemented this new standard. So here's where you're actually seeing it hit your books. It didn't hit the governmental funds because it only affects the full accrual statements here, but that's why overall this shows a negative for the year because of that change in accounting principle. All right, the last of the funds then is your internal service funds. They are summarized here. They're combined on page 23 in the last column. And if you can see the screen maybe behind you there on the wall, that might be a little easier to see it. But it'll list out the individual funds. You can find those in the very back of the booklet, that detail. Basically what I'm talking about here, though, is the overall trend. So these are your insurance funds, your liability funds, and what you're looking for is what's the trend here. You can see it's been very consistent, 8.8 million to just over 9 million this year. If there was any negative, significant negative trends is what you'd be looking for to see. Is for instance, your liability and insurance fund charging enough for premiums to cover the costs? And that isn't the case here. These are maintaining, and I don't see any problems currently with the funds as is. You got a small deficit balance there in the retirement health savings fund, but you're addressing that as well. And it's on page 83 if you want to make a note there too, if you're looking for the detail of these funds in the big booklet. All right, lastly then is a summary of your long-term obligations. So what does the county owe? That first row, general obligation bonds. I mentioned before you issued $27 million of bonds during 2018, so that's why that number increased as it did there. And then we look at the very bottom, there's a ratio. That's a measurement against the statutory limit of how much debt you can hold that's tax supported. So that's your general obligation bonds and notes. You're at 12.7% of that limitation. If you're to go to 100, obviously that'd have a pretty significant impact on mill rates. Plus you'd have to go to referendum if you wanted to borrow more. So it's not typically practical for a county to drive this number up really high. Typical, depending on projects, you had a pretty decent sized project here. That's why yours is at 12%. We'll see it anywhere from probably 5 to 20% typically. All right, last page is just a summary of some new standards. That's more important for your finance team to know what's coming down. But yeah, overall, pretty good results. Anything else, any good questions that I can try to answer here for you tonight?
Supervisor Schoberg.
So I'm a member of the administration committee, so we did see the summary report at that time, and it was easier to follow their script when we had that paperwork in front of us. So it's too bad we didn't have it for everybody today. But the issue on the nursing home came up as to whether or not it's making money or losing money. And if I could just have the auditor refer to page 23. And this is on an accrual basis, and depreciation on an accrual basis means that, well, it's as if the buildings are depreciating and things like that, so eventually we'd have to replace them, and it goes like that. But cash-wise, there's not a separate cash report that's produced, or is there?
There is. Yep. You'll want to move on in the booklet to the next page. It's actually a statement of cash flows, which you might be you're referring to. And so that'll walk through the actual movement of cash within this fund. Okay. So not to get too technical on you here, so I'll probably just point you into the third to last row, and that gives you the net change. So there was a net change of negative $2,000, $2,642.
Page 25?
Page 25, yep, sorry. Okay. Yep, and here you have to look at that first column, of course, that's headed by the nursing home fund, and you work through it to the bottom to see what the net change was. So, I guess one particular item on here to note, though, is while pretty close to break even, this fund was actually able to pay back the general fund. So it was generating enough to not only pay its bills, but then to pay the general fund back some. So Yep, Jonathan highlighted it there right in the middle of the page. You'll see a negative 811,000. That was cash flow borrowing from the general fund at the end of 17. So as it was able to produce enough cash during the year, it was able to pay some of it back. It's still got about 300 and some thousand left at the end of 18, but it's trending in the right direction. Had you not paid that back, you'd have seen this on a cash flow basis generate much better cash flow than it had in the past.
So the nursing home operations were more than break even, and we were able to pay back prior debt of close to 800,000, is that correct?
Yes, I would agree with that statement. Yep. Yep.
So, just to be clear, so this, on the nursing home, again, it does show 763,000 supplemental payment revenue. Could you describe that in a little bit more detail? On page 23.
Oh, sure. Yep, on page 23, that's just another revenue source for the nursing home. So that's revenue that comes from state sources.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we discussed also that the debt service itself is off the books, so it doesn't really include, it's not included in these numbers. We're talking purely operational.
This is purely operational, yep. So related to the facility you're talking, that debt
Yes,
service, yeah, that's controlled and paid out of the debt service fund of the county that I talked about earlier on. Just checking double quick, make sure I'm not forgetting something here. But yeah, there's no long-term bonding or notes that the nursing home is carrying. That would be on page 21 if it was there. There's some other long-term obligations, but it's related to payroll-related type obligations.
Okay. But that's identified someplace in here.
Yep. Yep, the facility debt, yep. That was, I guess if you're looking for details on that, you'd go to a footnote, long-term debt footnote. Page 46, exactly right. Yep. I mean, this is summarized, it's grossed up by type of debt, but if you wanted to track how much was outstanding, that would tie into the very last comments I made about your long-term debt as well.
All the repayment schedules are following on page 47. This is by issuance.
Okay. Yeah, this looks like everything is mushed together, so we're, oh, there it is, okay. No, okay, the 331, okay, that's the receivables and payables.
Yep.
So the actual outstanding, where is that in the debt service in here?
Bottom part of that page, and then, like Jonathan said, if you wanted the individual debt issue, can we point it out in this one?
Yeah, page 47, it starts. The top issuance here was listed for the nursing and dementia crisis facility. This is just one of the $10 million instruments. It's going to be a little bit hard to pinpoint your exact, what is your total debt for the nursing home in this case, because the financing tools were spread over a couple of years as the project kept going. Mm-hmm. So, in 1 year, in this case, you borrowed $10 million for the project, and I believe there's another one that should be identified here as like another $10 million issuance. I'd have to go back and specifically look historically of when those specific nursing home debt instruments were taken up.
Okay. Okay.
Well, they are identified here. The first one is the 10 million issued September 1st, 2015, and the second one is the next one down, issued March 2nd, 2016. So it's those two. And so once the profit from the nursing home is done paying back the amount that we borrowed for the upfront shortage, then we can start to use that profit, if you will, to pay down these debts too. We can use it to pay anything. But I remember when we decided to fund the nursing home, we did expect this to realize a net income for the county, and it should pay back a big part of the financing. So, if things go well.
Supervisor Malik?
I have a different kind of question that relates to accounts receivables. And I'm looking at page 33, note 1D, to accounts receivable. Client accounts receivable in the Health and Human Services Fund are offset by an allowance for doubtful accounts of approximately $0. All other accounts receivable are considered to be collectible in full. Are you auditors the ones who are considering those to be collectible in full?
Well, we can't make that conclusion, but we confer with your finance team and they make the call on that, whether they can. We test it as part of the process to, basically we're looking for collections after year end typically to see if it's coming in as expected. Yeah, but that technically a determination of that is made by our clients.
By management?
Yep.
By us, in other words?
Yep.
But you made some tests of it, you said?
Yep.
Some random checks to see whether payments that were expected actually were received?
Correct.
Is
Yep.
that
We're
what I
testing the
heard you say?
receivable balances. That's how we would test it. Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Well, thank you, Brock.
Thank you so
you,
much.
Jonathan.
My pleasure. If you think of any other questions, you can just filter them through finance and we'll get back to you too.
We're going to move on to our annual department reports. I'm going to ask if we can probably keep them just a little bit shorter tonight because we got a big agenda to go through. But the first one's the judicial, circuit court judges, court commissioner, and register probate annual report.
Hello, I'm Scott Nordstrand, and I'm the judge of Branch 1 of the Circuit Court. I think I know most of you, and I'm glad to be here tonight to provide a few comments about the courts and its current state. I have my colleagues, one of them there, and two back there. Commissioner Dunlop here as well, and so we're all glad to be here. First of all, we want to begin by thanking the County Board for the support of the Circuit Courts. It is a collaborative effort, as you know, in Wisconsin, where the courts are funded partially by the state, but in large part by the counties. And we couldn't do our job without you. And not just you, the county board, but all of the public officials, the elected public officials, the DA, the sheriff, and other entities as well, the clerk of courts, county clerk as well. All of the departments assist us in our efforts, and I would be remiss if I didn't also, once a year, I'd like to at least say thanks to the staff that we work with every day. And I can tell you, being the new judge, I'm the new guy, that you cannot do this job without these people who support us day in and day out. Our judicial assistants, Karen, Ryan, Jody, Tamara, and Brenda, do great work for us every day. They're the folks that help the judges schedule and keep us on track and remind me when I'm not at a meeting that I'm supposed to go to. It didn't have to happen tonight, by the way. Our court reporters, these folks actually work for the state, but they're the ones that keep track of what we say in court, what everyone says in court. Valerie, Gina, Vicki, Vanessa. The register and probate, Erica Nelson, and the first deputy and second deputy, Rebecca and Sarah, and of course our court commissioners who take on a lot of the heavy lifting. There's one of them right here, Commissioner Dunlop and Commissioner Heckman, and those folks are provided by the county. And so, I just want you to know that all of us judges definitely appreciate that. Now, I want to take a couple of minutes to talk about two issues. We can't really talk about everything in the courts, and so I wanted to take an opportunity to talk about two things that I think, and we all as judges think are important. First of all, 3 of the judges here in St. Croix County just got back from a children's conference in the Dells, done every 2 years to address children's issues in the courts. 3-day conference, and we had our social workers down there, we had our guardians, had Lightem down there, and the 3 of the 4 judges were there. You have to have somebody. I think it was Judge Black stayed back, but somebody has to stay here and keep justice moving. But it was an opportunity to learn about what the trouble that the state and a little bit of the county faces in terms of how we deal with children that come before the court. And one of the most important issues is when children need the protection of the county because of abuse or because of neglect, and they're taken out of their home. that's one of the most dramatic acts that can ever happen to anybody, that they're taken out of their home, away from their parents. No matter whether those parents are doing a lousy job or not, it's obviously a traumatic event. And so we need to work, as required by the statute, to achieve permanence for those kids, as we say. We need to find a way for them to either get back with their parents, because we provided services through the Department of Health Services and all the other efforts that the county can make. Either the parents get better and can be a safe place for the kids, or we find another permanent solution in short order. And I think some of the statistics that we saw for St. Croix County was that in the first year, we hope we could do a little better. That against the standards that the federal government has and the state is doing elsewhere, we could do a little better in terms of getting kids permanency in that first year as they move out of the home because of some bad situation. Now, you have in front of you a brochure, and I'm getting to the point. One of the ways that we could help, we think, is through a program called CASA. And this is a program where we've applied for a grant along with Barron County and some others in the region to try to have court-appointed special advocates. And this would be volunteers in our community would apply and become unpaid volunteers for a nonprofit entity, St. Croix County CASA, and these folks would be trained and then would be, as child protection cases arise, they would be assigned to particular children. And as we heard at the conference last week, one fellow said, and I love this quote, "Every kid is one caring adult away from being a success story." And so this is an effort to provide children in need with one caring adult. So this person would volunteer to once a week go see the child in their home, see how it's going, interact with them, connect with them, and then come back when we have court hearings to provide input back to the court on their perspective. You know, a sort of a, and not, I don't want to use the word amateur, because they're trained people with very serious training, but they're not lawyers. They're regular folks who've probably spent their life with their own kids and their grandkids and now want to give something back. Anyway, that's the program. We don't have it. It's existed around the country since the 1980s. When I was in Alaska for 20 years, CASA had been there since the 80s. We didn't know a system that didn't have CASA and having these people assigned to children's protection cases. Now, so far the grant application hasn't been met with success. But the lucky thing is the judges here today are very much supportive, as I think is the rest of the folks in the county here who proposed the grant application, that this is something we can do regardless of whether we get the grant. Because frankly, it involves having probably one staff person in an office here in the county to coordinate this with the state office that does CASA, and then having, you know, probably, I'm going to guess here, but it's a pretty good guess, maybe $100,000 a year to fund this office and a staff person to administer and manage the volunteers. So it's doable, and our plan would be that this gets funded through community fundraising efforts. It's not, this isn't a county board come and pay for something. If you wanted to participate at some level, that would be good. But our idea is for this to be sustainable is to work with charitable foundations and say, what better way to give back to our community with charitable funds than to help kids in need? So that's my pitch on CASA, and I wanted to pass that along. One last thing I'll say has to do with another effort we're working on in the court system, and that is improving our technology. You've seen the budget request for a capital project request for $200,000. It's about $50,000 a courtroom. I encourage you, everybody come on up and see the technology that we've got. It's simply not adequate to allow us to use multimedia presentations in the courtroom. It's one TV and a video conferencing system And the TV is actually, if I'm sitting here, I'm sitting on the bench here, and I'm looking at the folks who are appearing in the jail on the video. The TV is like there, like this. I can't even see the faces of the people, hardly. I can't distinguish between somebody who's 20 years old and 60 years old, frankly. But what we could do for a reasonable amount of money is to add TV monitors to various places in the courtroom so that we could use it not only for video conferencing, but for also presentation of evidence and other things in the court. And I'd encourage you, if you've got any questions, feel free to ask me or just come on up. So that was longer than I know the chair would like, but I hope it was helpful to you. And I'll leave you with one thing. I know that the judges have told me that you've been invited in the past to do a ride-along with the judge. And I'd encourage you to come on up and sit on the bench with us and see what it's like. Because I can tell you, as a new judge who's been doing this now for about 9 months, I just finished my ride-along in January. And it's an exciting experience. You're going to learn a lot, and you'll probably get a new perspective on what it is that judges face every day. And I appreciate your time. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to ask them about whatever you'd like. And after that, I'm going to ask Judge Waterman to talk about treatment court. Anything?
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Michael Waterman. I am Circuit Court Judge for Branch 4, and for the past 3 years, I have presided over the treatment court. The judge's work consists a lot of handling a criminal caseload. In fact, probably 2/3 of our casework is related to criminal law. Probably 2/3 of that docket relates to drug and alcohol use and abuse. So we're dealing a lot with cases where people are committing crimes involving possessing drugs, selling drugs, committing crimes to get more drugs, or committing crimes because they're high on drugs and alcohol. The treatment court has been a valuable tool for all of the judges because in appropriate cases we can refer an individual to the treatment court where they will hopefully get life skills and treatment so that they can stop offending. It's very easy for judges to get angry and throw somebody in jail or in prison, but trust me, there will be a day when that person is going to be returned to society, and chances are they'll still have the same drug and alcohol addiction problems that they had when they entered the system. So the treatment court is a valuable resource. Last year when I gave the report, I noted that we had just started a separate track for alcohol offenders. We call it the OWI track, or track 1. It's been very successful so far. We have about 12 people in that program. We have not had any graduations yet, but we have a number of participants that are well on their way, and I expect we'll have some graduations perhaps later in 2019 or maybe even in 2020. The program is operating at near capacity. I think we have about 22 people in the program now. We've always figured we could probably handle about 20 to 25, depending where they are in our phase structure. The newer participants require more time than people that are later in the phases. We couldn't do it without our coordinator, Kim Kitzberger. She really commits 110% to the program and has done wonderful things to help develop the program into what it is today. But I also wanted to recognize and appreciate the support that the county board has given us. We're adequately funded, but more so, you have individually shown an interest in our program. I've talked with many of you about what we do, shared statistics, answered your questions. Many of you have attended hearings, including our graduations, and a lot of you have given me and Kim words of encouragement and support. I personally thank you for that. My door is open all the time, so if you ever have any questions about the program, please feel free to stop by and ask. You can also ask the coordinator, Kim Kitzberger. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Judge Waterman? Supervisor Akrop.
It's not a question, it's a comment that for those of you who've never been to a drug court graduation, it's by far probably one of the highlights of being on the county board. I mean, the amount of work and everything that the individual has gone through to get to where they are, it's recognized, and gives you a really good feeling. So if you get a chance, go to a drug court graduation. You should get a notice in your email. Okay. Yeah, thanks.
There are very few things that give me joy and bring me happiness as a judge, sadly. One of those are adoptions. The other is a drug court graduation. They bring me a lot of joy and a lot of happiness. So I echo Supervisor Ochterhoff's comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Whoops. Nope.
I guess I didn't stand quick enough. My name is Steve Dunlap. I'm the St. Croix County Family Court Commissioner. And I see a copy of the letter that I sent to everyone to outline sort of what I do. My main job is to protect the children in families that have parents that are separating or have separated. And we do that by trying to get the parents to come to an agreement as to what is best for their children. That's not always easy to do, and sometimes decisions have to be made. But it's before that final hearing, before the circuit judge, that my job really zeroes in on. And so when two parents are separating and they have children, the biggest question is what's going to happen with the children. The interesting in our law says that if children come from a home that the parents are not married, unless there's a court order that says that there's custody to the father of the children, the father of those children does not have any rights. There has to be a court order. This week, in fact, a situation evolved. The parents have a 14-year-old daughter, and they've been sharing placement of this daughter for 14 years with no order regarding custody or placement. And mainly the father in St. Croix County has placement. Child goes to school, but the child visits mom, sees mom on a regular basis in Polk County. Child calls dad, you have to come and get me from mom's house. Mom's on drugs, passed out, you have to come and get me. What dad also knows is that mom has a 7-year-old in the house that he's not the father of. Child protection in Polk County gets involved. Father goes to an attorney and says, you know, what are my rights? You have no rights to this child. No court has given you custody rights for this child, 14 years old. And so he brings an action in court, and that comes, the first hearing comes to my office. Obviously and thankfully, the child has a good father, has a good mother when the mother's not using. But those are the kind of situations that my office handles, everything up to the time of the final hearing, and then post-judgment, after the final hearing, after the circuit judge has made the decision. Obviously with kids, there's always changes, and so those kind of changes also comes to my office. Again, I reiterate what Judge Waterman and Judge Nordstrom said. Come on up and sit in on a case. We're more than happy to have you there to see us. And again, I want to thank you, especially for the security that you've given to this courthouse. It makes my office a lot easier to handle. My assistant Brenda is fantastic, but having her secured is unbelievably important to my office and to her. So I appreciate that and all the support that you've given us. Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you. UW Extension,
Yeah, Kristen Bruder is here from UW Extension.
Yep.
Just a little anxious is all, so sorry about that. Good evening. First, I'd just like to thank you, as the judges did, for allowing me to be here and represent Extension, and to thank you for the support that you've given us. We are co-funded, as you know, between the state, the federal government, and the county, and so we really do appreciate this partnership and the support that you've given us. A couple of updates. July 1, 2019 marked a really important date in the history of Extension. We have merged with UW-Madison. So as you can see, I'm sporting my red instead of Extension blue. So we are now UW-Madison Extension or Division of Extension. So we're no longer considered UW Extension. So we're now the Division of Extension. A couple staffing updates. We have Carrie Weiss has replaced Eric Biltonen. If you knew Eric as the Community and Organizational Development Educator, Eric has moved on to greater things in Washington, D.C. So we're very happy and wished him well as he has left us. Carrie started the end of August. I'm continuing to work on staffing plans across the area. As you know, we've changed in recent years, and as the Area Extension Director, I have 3 counties that I cover, Polk, St. Croix, and Pierce counties, and I'm continuing to try to find efficiencies across the area for staffing and the fit for the positions with the needs within the counties. So that's continuing, and we're making some great progress. You have the report for Extension in front of you, and some of the highlights that are listed in that report. And some great pictures are in there as well. Obviously, this is just a snapshot. Please come in and see us and talk to the educators. Feel free to have them come in and talk about their programming. Feel free to come and talk with me, or to go directly to them to some of their events. They would love to see you. If you have specific requests or needs, or constituents have come to you on some needs and you're wondering if Extension can help, please come and talk with me about that, and we can see how maybe we can help and intervene and work with you on that. Just one other update. Extension's relationship with the St. Croix County Fair. I know some of you have heard about this, and some of you have asked me some questions about it. We have, due to some budget cuts, obviously we have reorganized and changed, but we have limited staffing across the state. And so there has been conversations happening across the state with Extension and the fair boards as to our roles and responsibilities. And that has occurred here in St. Croix County as well, working with Gail and the fair board members as well, to align our mission and values and to align the fair's mission and values. So I've heard that Extension is no longer a part of the fair. That's simply not true. We are still a strong partner with the fair. We have aligned what our responsibilities are at the fair with the fair board, and worked with them to really carve out what that looks like for 2020. I'd be happy to share that document with you and talk with you more about that if you have some concerns or some questions about that. So that concludes my report. Thank you. If you have questions, please feel free to give me a call, or I can entertain them now.
Any questions? Supervisor Schoberg?
So you mentioned budget cuts, and it sounds like you're making the best of what you can do. It'd be interesting for me to see an analysis of what has happened over the last 5 years with UW Extension. I know that we've relied on the staff that you've provided to us, the farmers have, we have for our water study, and now there's another consolidation as of July 1st. It'd be interesting for me to know, where were we 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and then what have the cuts been? How many less FTEs are now available to us, and what programming shortages have occurred? You know, this is a friendly report, and I'd like a more realistic report, saying here's what we're facing.
Sure.
Because I think you do need more financial support, and I think the head of our state and our local legislators should know about this too. It's been a vital, important benefit to the farming community as well as to our county. So would you be able to do that? So I'm requesting it. You're not just doing it by yourself. I'm requesting that you provide say a 5-year look back as to here's where we were back in 2015, here's where we're going to be in 2020.
Are you thinking specifically for St. Croix County or statewide?
Just St. Croix County.
Okay.
Impact on us.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Yep.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you, Kristen.
St. Croix County Fair Association, Gail Meyer.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the board, visitors and guests. Thank you for having me here this evening. My name is Gail Meyer, and I'm currently president of the St. Croix County Fair Board, for those of you who may not know me. And yes, Greg, I'm still involved at the fair. Hopefully, you all received a copy of the official report that I sent in, and it's got everything in there that you need to know, and if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. But tonight, I'd just like to share some highlights of the fair for 2019. Every year, we try to come up with a theme, and this year, our theme was Blue Jeans and Country Dreams. And we had just some of the most unique road displays and planters and decorations at the fair that was just absolutely so much fun. If you do not know, the St. Croix County Fair is a free fair. We are one of only a few in the state that offer free admission to the fair for all the events and free entertainment. In 2019, we had 764 exhibitors in 4-H, FFA, other youth organizations, open class, senior citizens, and school exhibits. And those 764 people brought in 7,026 entries to the fair. Now that's a lot of stuff to judge. Premiums that were paid to these hardworking people totaled $12,229.75. It's interesting to note that while animals and agriculture are most associated with the fair, youth in cultural arts and photography brought in over 1,000 exhibits. In open class, 59 individuals contributed 462 exhibits in flowers and houseplants and antiques. So as you can tell, the fair is just not about cattle and crops. The weather was a challenge this year. It was hot, humid, rainy. We had a couple of storms. We had almost a mini evacuation on Friday evening, and we had a lot of mud. But it was really, really good to see the presence of so many county resources that were there at the fair, not only with our law enforcement, but people that exhibited in the vendor buildings and things like that, and not to mention the employee county picnic that's held on Thursday night of the fair. Some updates for the fair. This year we made some significant improvements. One highlight was the replacement of 98 fluorescent lighting fixtures that we transformed over into energy efficient LED bulbs. We've created some additional power services. We have 14 Wi-Fi access points through the fairgrounds to give us better communication on the super highway there. New this year, we had a cricket spitting contest and a beanbag tournament, both of which were fun new adventures and brought in some people to participate in those as well. The 2020 vision that we have for the creation of the new multi-livestock species barn is currently underway, and we're very, very happy to see that things are moving along. There's some pictures there. I took some more pictures today. The site is getting prepped. We expect delivery of materials mid-October, with the building to be up by the end of the year. Our goals for the future: we are going to do some more electrical upgrades. We want to purchase some AEDs. And then we have some other things, long-range goals that I've also included in the report. Planning for the fair is a year-round task, even though many people don't know this. Primarily, we are a volunteer organization without a working office, staff, and hundreds of hours are spent taking care of this business. But what many people also don't know is that we don't do it alone. There are so many people who contribute in so many ways to the success of this great community event. So I want to give a very special thank you to the entire county board for your continued support, which we so very much appreciate. And also to our county board supervisor representatives, especially Judy Achterhoff, for her steadfast support and very active participation. Finally, I want you to know that your support is very important because the St. Croix County Fair is more than just a local event. It's really about the importance of the fair industry in Wisconsin. All across the state, county fairs play a vital role for the economy, society, and heritage of rural communities. As agriculture is the backbone of our economic system, the county fair is the backbone of promoting the agriculture experience in our community. The fair offers visitors the opportunity to see, hear, touch, smell, and taste the richness and variety of what our county has to offer through teaching and learning experiences that are enjoyable for all ages. So from Legos to livestock, the fair offers something for everyone. I strongly encourage you to attend the 2020 St. Croix County Fair. I brought some fair books so you can see what you can perhaps contribute and bring as an exhibit yourselves next year. I gave you a save the date card so you won't forget what it is. And we'll see you in the July 15th through the 19th, where we're going to be moving and grooving at the St. Croix County Fair. Thank you.
Any questions for Gail?
It's not a question, it's just the comment of, it's been great being on a representative to the fair board, because I'll tell you, the people on that fair board put in a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of energy because they care. And just, it's a good feeling and so forth. So, yep. And that's one of the reasons I wanted everybody to put in 4 volunteer hours starting. But who knows what will happen with that.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you, Gail.
Thank you.
And I see down here, just got a note that Community Development, Ellen Denzer, will wait till next month for her report. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you, Ellen. Next item
report.
of business then is the financial report.
Yep.
For the sake of brevity, I'm going to just say that I've reviewed the monthly financial reports. We're 8 months into the fiscal year now, through the end of August. Both expenditures and revenues are in line with the approximately 33% of budget remaining, both for revenues and expenditures. And I've gone over these in a little bit more detail with the various standing committees, which I report to. And then also in your report, you have a summary of the capital improvement project status. So I don't know if there are any questions from the board. Yes, Supervisor Achterhoff.
On page 63, if you go down to, this is probably more for Ken, it's for Parks 120, and their revenue has exceeded. I mean, they expected 758,000, they got 960,000. But if you go further over, it's like negative 200 and negative 26. Shouldn't it be 126.66%? Instead of a negative percent for the revenues, because they made more than they expected. But on here, it's showing that it's less, or what am I not understanding?
Ken, can you help her with those percentages?
Yeah, I can rewrite the formulas if you prefer. The negative numbers on revenues, though, are good when you're compared to budget. When you've gone over the budgeted amount on revenues, that's good. When you go over the budgeted amount on expenses, that's bad. And the percentage column, that's formula driven. I can probably rewrite that to make that appear differently. But it's just the same formula. If it's a negative number, it's going to give you a negative percentage.
But why would it give you a negative percentage when it's a positive percentage? Because they made more.
Whenever you divide by a negative, it's always a negative. Two negatives make a positive.
Okay,
It's just math. I'll change the math if it's better. But,
well, it's just to me it doesn't make sense.
Right.
Because it's a great thing, but you look at the negative and it looks lousy.
correct.
It
Yep.
looks like they haven't made 23% of what they were supposed to, and
I understand that. And my job is to educate you that negative revenues on the budget are good, negative expenses are bad.
okay, and I got one more question on page 66. No, it's like the task force and the drug fund are all used up already. So where does that leave them? That's on page 66. Oh, I'm getting up there.
It's 286 and 287. I see we had zero budget and year-to-date expenditures, Ken.
Yeah.
Oh, my mistake. Yeah, page 67, sorry.
So on those were new funds in 2019. And so we had just created those. We probably had not budgeted for them at that point in time. So we didn't have anything in the budget, but we are using those funds now. So going forward, hopefully that data will become more consistent and more comparable year over year.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Any other questions?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. We'll move forward. We get into our business items. I have a question. I've been asked to move number 8 up to the top of the list for the resolution approving the sale of the highway facility in Hammond. Is that all right with the board to do that? Not seeing any negatives out there. We'll move that forward and we'll move on that. I need a motion. Supervisor Peterson, need a second. Supervisor Motatum. Discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. To keep it brief, we, upon the completion and construction of a new highway facility, we listed the old highway property in the village of Hammond for sale. The Highway Transportation Committee contracted for the services of a commercial real estate broker, a gentleman by the name of Charles Feathers, who is present this evening. He has been the broker representing the county in this transaction. We do have an offer to purchase the property in Hammond. The administration committee met earlier this afternoon prior to county board, reviewed the offer in detail, and are recommending approval, authorization to proceed with the sale of the property in Hammond. And Mr. Feathers is here this evening if you have specific questions regarding the transaction.
Any questions from the board?
Mr. Feathers, do you want to just review the terms of the sale?
Sure.
Thank you.
The offer is $1.5 million, including the tower, with the county leasing the tower back for 10 years at $1 per year. There's no other contingencies. It's an all-cash offer. Closing is expected to be on the 6th of January next year.
President Schoberg.
We might want to disclose some of the anticipated expenses associated with the sale. So if you would, in addition to a commission payable, there would also be the cost we would have to incur to remove the underground storage tanks. And then I think it's going to be also the utility wiring to the shed. So we have a new generator that we're going to be hooking up to utility service, and there's some cost for that. I think I heard, was that the 80,000 number?
Yes.
All right, so those are kind of the known expenses. We know we have a commission payable. We know we have the expense associated with removing the tanks and then also the hookup of the utility. But I also have to mention there's a possible unknown, and the unknown is, and this isn't a condition of the sale, he's going to go ahead and purchase it as is, but if later on there's contamination discovered, it's going to be our obligation to do cleanup. There might be cleanup funds available, but we're not selling it and then walking away from any future responsibility. So to the extent I misspoke, Corporation Counsel, would you correct the record? But that's my understanding.
I'm ready to vote.
I don't disagree with anything that's said, but.
Okay.
That's the way to muzzle a lawyer.
Are there any other questions or discussion? If none, then we'll vote. That's all yeses. Thank you.
Thank you.
And number one on our list, the ordinance creating Chapter 79 of the St. Croix County Code of Ordinance, all-terrain and utility terrain vehicle routes.
Motion to adopt.
Motion by Supervisor Peavy. Have a second? Supervisor Austin, second that. Discussion.
Yeah, I have two corrections or typo to correct. So I would make a motion to amend it to read, and let's see, on packet page 72, line 104, it says, "No sign shall be mounted on any existing county sign post or telephone post pole." The motion would be to change the word telephone to utility, be more general. And then I have one more on page 73, line 113. It says County S from 280th Street to 90th Street in the town of Richmond, and that should read in the town of Glenwood. And I would move for those two changes.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to amend.
I don't think we have a main motion yet, do we?
Yeah, I made it.
Correct. Any discussion on the corrections that are being made? Not seeing anybody. Just on the corrections, have a vote on that. If everybody in favor, vote at this time. Thank you. That's all yeses. Now we'll go back to the original on that amended. Is there any more discussion on that? And the all-terrain utility vehicle routes? There's no discussion, no questions? We'll vote on that as it was amended. It's all yeses, thank you. Next one is the resolution authorizing placement at the Corps Academy and other secure detention facilities for a period of not to exceed 365 days. Do I have a motion to that? Supervisor Osmus, second. Supervisor Anderson. Discussion. Supervisor Octorov.
I just have a question, like you have someone there and they're doing a really lousy job for 200 days, and then they finally get with a program, but it's gonna take them more than 165 days to get to where they want them to be. What happens? I mean, at the end of 365 days, no matter where that person is, they're out of there? Or what happens? Well, that's a good question. You know, it's a kid. It's, you know, you don't want them tossed out.
That's unfortunately not a question that I anticipated. So I don't have a perfect answer for you tonight. It's something we can research, but it wouldn't necessarily be unusual that a child in a placement may struggle and then have periods where they're able to succeed. So we've very rarely used these types of placement resources, maybe once in the last couple of years, since we've been able to use the Eau Claire facility. But really this is about trying to have resources that are more local for our children, with some of the work that's being done to close Lincoln Hills. The facility in La Crosse is, you know, a couple hours away, a little more than, and the planned facilities that are secure residential would be in the southern or the southeast part of the state. I can do some more research and get back to you if that's a question that would postpone action on this resolution. But it's 365 days, so we would probably, my guess would be, without doing the research, would be we'd have to look at discharge.
I mean, I'm for this program, but I think maybe, I don't know if you can change the wording saying not to exceed 365 days except for, I don't know, but it's just, I mean, you're talking about kids. And if they don't make it and they're 30 days from making it and they're tossed out, and it's just not, it doesn't seem right when there's a rigid number.
Well, I believe that's driven by statute,
Oh.
so I'd have to go back and look at the statute. But we wouldn't just kick somebody out. We would certainly work with the facility, with whomever is assigned as a direct staff. But again, I believe that's statutorily driven, not something that we imposed because we felt like 365 days was a limit.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? We have a motion and a second on the floor. We'll vote. That's all yeses. Thank you. Grant to a hospital in Eau Claire County for expansion psychiatric bed capacity resolution. I have a motion. Supervisor Octorov, the motion. Do I have a second? Supervisor Schoberg. Discussion. Seeing no discussion, no questions. We have a motion and a second on the floor. We'll vote.
Roger.
Excuse me. Oh, Supervisor John.
22 beds doesn't seem like much for all those that everybody's being, for the area that's being populating. And how many are juvenile and how many are adults?
I don't have an answer.
Did I miss?
I think it's it's approximately 22 beds, and the grant is for $15 million. So it's going to be as many beds possible as that.
This is a start.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Exactly.
But I can see it being overpopulated right away.
22 beds would really help.
Pardon?
22 beds would really help.
Well, yeah.
And I would say that, you know, our office handles the civil commitments. Usually there's no more than 3 or 4 detained at any one point in a, you know, an appropriate.
Well, I'm looking at Marathon County,
unit.
how many they.
Right. But it helps,
Yeah.
because there are beds in Eau Claire, at both Sacred Heart and Mayo. These would be additional 22 beds.
Any other questions or discussion? We have a motion and a second on the floor. We'll vote. It's all yeses. Thank you. Regional Crisis Stabilization Facility Resolution. I have a motion. Supervisor Motatum, do I have a second? Supervisor Malik. Any discussion? Any information on it? You had the resolution to read it. There's no further discussion. We have a motion to second on the floor. We'll vote. That's all yeses. Thank you. Resolution adopting post-insurance debt compliance policy. Supervisor Peterson, the motion. Second, Supervisor Malik. Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, federal IRS rules, SEC rules, and regulations and procedures are outlined when government municipalities issue tax-exempt bonds. The policy and procedures in the packet are not mandatory, they're not legally required, but they're highly recommended by our financial consultants, and so we are recommending the implementation of both the policy and procedures to govern our implementation and oversight of the bond proceeds.
Any questions or discussion? Okay. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Time to vote. And that's all yeses. Thank you. Budget amendment for fund balance transfer. Supervisor Peterson, I have a second to that. Supervisor Coulter, thank you. Discussion. Go ahead.
Pardon me?
You second that?
No, I wasn't seconding. I thought somebody else
Oh, we
did.
got to get a second first. Supervisor Schoberg, second. Okay, now discussion.
Okay. I have a couple questions about this because I understand that we're doing this fund balance transfer for the health center fund and the RHS fund. Would that be for the 2018 budget, or is that for the?
No, what this resolution will do is authorizes the transfer of 3.2 million from the undesignated fund balance, which is currently in excess of the 35% plus or minus 3. And so the resolution will transfer 200,000 of the 3.2 to the retirement health savings account, which is running a deficit, and then 3 million into the capital improvement fund. So it's a transfer of 3.2 million from the undesignated fund balance, 3 million into KIP and 200,000 into the retirement health savings account.
Okay, so when are we going to do the budget amendment for the deficit that HHS ran in 2018?
If there was, I don't have the amount that you're referring to, but the Health and Human Services has a fund balance so that if the operating budget is running a deficit at year end, there's a adequate fund balance that would cover any deficiencies. And I don't know exactly what the final dollar amount was. Was it in the audit, Ken?
It was, yeah. It was in the $300,000 range, which is actually pretty close to what we had estimated for that budget year.
Well, it was $366,000 and some change, but that number, I call it the bouncing ball number because it varied all over the map. We had at least five different numbers about what the number was going to be. And
Well, I think throughout the course of the year, you're correct. There was, some estimating of what that would be, but at the end of the day, it's what the final number is. That's what is most important.
Supervisor Doctorow.
So after taking the 3 million out, what is the percentage of our fund balance now?
If upon the transfer of the 3.2 million, it would be at 38%.
Oh, so we're still above the, okay.
We're still above the 35% plus or minus 3.
Yeah, but we're at the plus
Right at
3.
38%.
Okay,
right.
thanks.
Any other discussion or questions? Motion second on the floor. We'll vote on that. One no, the rest yeses. Down to our last one, resolution amending county administrator's employment agreement for placement on McGrath compensation grid. Supervisor Peterson. I have Supervisor Schoberg. There's a motion and a second on the floor. Discussion on that.
The HR director is here if you have any specific questions. As part of the McGrath compensation study, which the board approved, a recommendation was made by Dr. McGrath that the county administrator position be placed on the compensation grid. To accomplish that, the employment agreement for the county administrator needs to be amended, and the language for that amendment is included in the authorizing resolution. But Tara is here if there are any questions as to why or what Dr. McGrath's thinking was on that.
Any questions? If not, there's a motion and a second on the floor. We'll vote.
Yeah, next time you're not going to have it so easy, Tara.
All yeses and one no. That concludes our business. The committee of the whole meeting, I was talking to Administrator Thompson about that, and we'd like to change that time, if it's okay with everybody, to 8 o'clock instead of 9 o'clock on the 10th for that committee, the whole meeting?
So we'd start at 8 o'clock in the morning. Hopefully we'll be done an hour early. Ken handed out your budget books. They have a picture of the new highway facility on the cover. Please take these with you and start going through them, and come prepared on the 10th with lots of good questions. Yes, sir.
So is this going to be better than last year's, which had a picture of a manure spreader on the cover?
Well, you be the judge of that.
You should see what they wanted to put on it.
And request for any future agenda items? Supervisor Coulter.
Yeah, I'd like to ask that the Starwood Neighborhood Homeowners Association items be placed on this board's agenda if community development won't accommodate it.
So we have to send it back to committee to bring it forward? What?
I think Dan has something to say.
What I said, and I was misquoted by the person in public comment. I said I'll look at it very, very carefully, and if it's appropriate, we'll put it on the agenda. And I would urge the chair to consider that with the same gravity. And that's all I'll say at this forum.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'd like to insist that it be placed on an agenda someplace, and maybe there's another supervisor that would join me in asking for that.
I'll join you in that.
Okay, so we have 3 others. So we have enough support for it to have to go back on the agenda.
I have a related but slightly different request, Chairman Larson, and that is that for the next meeting, the Community Development Committee inform the board when they will begin the public part of the process of planning the new park that will be adjacent to that. The timeline for the planning of that park.
Okay.
I think it's important that everybody understand we haven't closed on that property yet. We're way premature discussing this. No, not at all. But the horse is pushing the cart here.
Sorry. Judy. Right,
Just-
Dr. Hoff.
I don't know if it could be agenda. If we could get an update on what's happening for our request for the nursing home. Because I know at this point, we still we can only take private pay. And just wondering, yeah, just updating, because some of the new board members may not have any idea what we're talking about. So it would be kind of nice to have a brief update on what a 1-minute history, and then, what's happening and if there's any kind of timeline that we can see it. Yeah.
Okay. Any other agenda items? Or the county clerk report?
I just want to announce that the special election for the Congressional District 7 was called by the governor, but that I believe is going to be changed. And so it was set for December 30th and January 27th, and from what I'm reading, that will be changed. So notice is out, it's posted on the website. It's going to be published in the newspapers, but I believe there'll be an amendment coming to that.
Any announcements anybody has?
That's me again. Okay. The New Richmond Library is having a silent auction tomorrow night from 7 to 8:30 as a fundraiser for stuff, and they have some. I know my son has told me I have to bid on the 45th Parallel Distillery Tour and quart of, I don't know if it's gin or whiskey, but that was my son that I have to do that. But they have a lot of different items. It's online. You can get on and find out.
Thursday, you said tomorrow.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's the 3rd on Thursday from 7 to 8:30, and you have to be present to win. So.
Any other announcements? Not seeing any. We've concluded. Thank you, everyone. We're adjourned.